Number 5.
何度でも起こすよきらめく奇跡輝く未来へつないでプリキュア
Hugto Precure. Translating as With a Hug Precure, this season is pretty much Precure's answer to Power Rangers Time Force. This series also takes a page from Yes 5 with another big focus on careers but with a time travel twist. A girl named Hana is just beginning middle school when one fateful day she encounters a mysterious baby with otherworldly powers and her fairy guardian. Nicknaming the baby Hugtan, Hana soon learns that this strange child is being pursued by the Kryasu Corporation, an evil conglomeration from the future who wants to use the baby to alter the present to suit their needs. But Hana is determined to make sure that their planned dark reality doesn't happen, and along with her friends, including aspiring actress Saya, junior figure skater Homare, guitarist Emiru, and her fellow musician Ruru, the girls become Cure Yel, Cure Ange, Cure Etoile, Cure Moscherie, and Cure Amour to try and protect everyone's future. If Hardcatch is considered one of the most mature seasons, then this one is right on par with it, as it tackles all sorts of subject matter that honestly I think even some adult shows struggle to get right. Each and every one of the girls are a joy to get to know, and every one of them goes through a satisfying character arc. For Saya, she's on her way to becoming an accomplished child actress thanks in part to the success of her mother in the movie industry. But when Saya finds a new passion to pursue, will she chase her new dream or continue to follow in her mom's footsteps? When Homare suffers a potentially crippling injury while skating, can she still be an athlete or is her career over? And if it is, can she reinvent herself? Emiru's uptight family can't imagine their daughter being a pop star guitarist. What happens when you have a passion for something and your family disapproves? And what about Emiru's almost like a sister best friend Lulu, who hails from another era entirely? Can the two remain friends if one has to go back to their own time period? And much like Nozomi from Yes 5, Hana is also faced with some indecision of what she wants to be when she grows up. So for the moment, she finds solace in supporting her friends. But what does it truly mean to cheer someone on? If someone's truly in despair, are you really helping them just by saying, "Don't worry, you can do it"? Or are you just spouting empty platitudes and making things worse for them? They're all heavy questions that are dealt with a level of maturity that's rare to see in kids' media nowadays. And speaking of mature, this season also wasn't afraid to tackle the discussion of gender coding and what it is to be a boy or girl or somewhere in between. We meet one of Homare's friends, a male figure skater who loves wearing dresses, and it's strongly implied that he hooks up with Emiru's older brother. So yeah, if you enjoy shows that love breaking gender norms or you're in the LGBT community, this season might be up your alley. This also isn't the first time a Precure team has had to take care of a baby. Fresh and Doki Doki are the biggest examples, and Mahoskai to an extent. Typically, the babies are mostly living props at best and annoying at worst, but not Hugatan. I'm not sure how to explain it, you really need to just watch to understand, but somehow Hugatan remains adorable without ever crossing the line into being ear-grating. It probably helps that she's not just the magic MacGuffin, but is treated like an actual character, and as for her inevitable fate, well, to say more would spoil a plot twist that I was kicking myself for not figuring out, considering how much sense it made in context. The villains are also arguably the best the franchise has had to offer. Each one of them are all memorable, with each general based off a different era in Japan's history. Thank you, Asian Zone, for teaching me this. From the boomers, to the 80s bubble, to the lost decade of the 90s, to millennials, they each tie in with the theme of preparing for the future while honoring the past, but not repeating its mistakes. Our main big bad this time around wants to freeze time to keep things permanently frozen in a perfect state so that a dark future doesn't happen. It's both an interesting and understandable motivation. good intentions taken to the ultimate extreme. But our heroines are determined to convince their foes that both the good and bad is what makes life worth living. If people don't move forward, then mankind will stagnate. Granted, the time travel mechanics are a little shaky, especially in the final third of the season, but hey, it's time travel. There's always going to be paradoxes. I'm willing to shut my brain off in this aspect. My only real note of contention with this season is that if any of you plan on getting into Precure, don't watch Hugito first. If possible, save it for last, because this season was the franchise's 15th anniversary, and we get a couple of special episodes that guest star some past Cure teams, capped off with an enormous battle that puts Avengers Endgame to shame. I had the biggest, goofiest smile on my face the entire time all 55 Cures came together to pummel a monster into oblivion, and it was the perfect way to cap off such a long marathon. When we feel sad, when we feel lost, to encourage the world towards a shining future, supporting everyone, heal the world, light up the world, love the world. We can beat anything. Number 4. Futariwa Precure Splash Star. Well, since we covered a season that was a bit more complicated, now let's go back to an earlier season when things were arguably simpler. So simple that, even more than Mahoskai, this seems to be the season that everyone either glosses over or just straight up forgets about. And the shame of that is downright criminal, because this was an important season in the franchise's overall history. You see, after the huge success of the original Futariwa and Max Heart, the showrunners decided that audiences probably had their fill of Cure's Black, White, and Shiny Luminous, and were ready to switch things up a bit with a brand new plotline, villains, and characters. However, and this is mostly speculation, so bear with me here, with Futariwa being so popular, the showrunners also didn't want to hit the young audience over the head with too radical a change in fear of losing viewers who had become attached to Nagisa, Honoka, and Hikari. So the writers decided to meet in the middle and create a season that, while it did have a new plot, new villains, and new heroines, they made them super similar to the previous season so that the audience would have something familiar before gradually easing them into the change. To this day, it's still argued of whether this was a good idea or not, since many of Splash Star's detractors dismissed this season of just being a carbon copy or downright rip-off of Futariwa, and it's easy to see why. Our two main heroines this time around are Saki and Mai, two girls who on the surface seem very different from one another, who are visited by a pair of fairies who tell them that the magical dimension they hail from is under siege from an evil group called the Dark Fall, who have destroyed a series of special fountains that connect the World Tree, which is the source of all life in the universe. Now our duo must become Cure Bloom and Cure Egret to restore each of the magical fountains and save the world. From that synopsis alone, this is sounding pretty familiar, isn't it? Even Saki and Mai's character designs look super similar to Nazika and Honoka, to the point that many people get the teams mixed up. Much like Nagisa, Saki is also a sports fanatic, only in this case it's softball instead of lacrosse. And rather than liking science like Honoka, Mai is a talented artist. In this regard, it's easy to see why so many people have said that they only got through the first couple episodes before giving up and moving on to a different series, writing this season off as just a Futariwa clone and nothing more. But for those of you out there who gave up on this one, I beg you to please try and give it another shot. Splash Star is a different show than the original Futariwa. It's just a bit more subtle with its differences, and it just takes a few episodes for those key differences to become apparent. And in my humble opinion, it's a better version of Futariwa. Remember back at number 10 when I said how Futariwa kinda suffers from first season syndrome since it was the start of the franchise and the creators arguably didn't quite know what they were doing yet and were still ironing out all the kinks? Well, if that's the case, then Splash Star is the result of what happens when the writers decide to basically do Futariwa over again, but fixes the mistakes they made last time. This season keeps everything that was great about the original while taking whatever shortcomings it had and either drops it or improves on it. The setting is much more distinct, taking place in a town near the ocean that leads to some beautiful backgrounds to look at. Even the town itself actually plays an important part in the story's mythos, a nice change from the previous series that had everything taking place in a fairly boring and generic looking city. Speaking of the previous series, while Saki is athletic, she's not nearly as hot-headed as Nagisa, and her family, who owns a bakery, gets a bit more focus. And while Mai is intelligent and soft-spoken, she's not an only child like Honoka, and this, combined with her eye for artistry, makes her friendships and interactions with people rather different. You just have to watch it to really get where I'm coming from here, but make no mistake, if you're just coming off Futariwa and Max Heart and go into this series and are put off by how much Saki and Mai seem like clones of Nagisa and Honoka, just have a little patience. They do become distinctly different people as time goes on. Speaking of different, our theme this time around is nature, with the magic MacGuffins being a bit more distinct and important since the girls are restoring forests and lakes and such and not just brightly colored stones. Our fairy companions this time around I also found were far less annoying. Unlike Meppel and Mipple, who had ear-grating voices and seemed to whine and complain constantly, Flappy and Choppy are a bit more quiet and much more likable, giving the girls occasional advice and trying to help them out rather than just snarking at them when they screw up. I also didn't mention it last time, but Futariwa had this running storyline with Nagisa having a crush on this older boy, and frankly it never really went anywhere, and her crush was as bland as cardboard. Thankfully, Splash Star learned from this, and while Saki has a crush on Mai's older brother, it's made clear from the start that this is an innocent crush not to be taken seriously, and Kazuya has, an actual personality. But far and away, the biggest improvement that Splash Star has over Futariwa is its villains. The original 2 seasons' biggest setback was its cast of antagonists that were fairly bland and forgettable. Not this season. Oh no. This season was like, we're gonna make our antagonists so outlandish and so colorful that you never forget them. The Spanish-speaking fire dude who's always dancing and singing, the guy who looks like Spider-Man's dopey cousin who travels underground like Bugs Bunny, the water lady obsessed with her looks who everyone always gets her name wrong, the gold muscle dude who's more concerned with working out and actually gives the girls advice on how to be better fighters because he has an honor code in battle. This was one series where I actually looked forward to the scenes with the villains because they were so hilarious and entertaining to watch. And I haven't even gotten to Michiru and Kairu, a pair of sisters who pose as students at the girls' school to try and find out information about them to use against them, but then slowly over time legitimately befriend Saki and Mai. Futariwa kinda did this with one of their antagonists, but the dude didn't get as much focus as the sisters here do, and their gradual shift from the dark side to the light side is perfectly paced, makes perfect sense, and is so satisfying to watch. I don't want to spoil anymore. You really need to just go in as blind as possible because that final plot twist with who the big bad of the season really is just mwah, perfection. I've probably rambled on enough about this season, so I'll leave you with this. If you plan on watching every season and want to start somewhere at the beginning to see the franchise's early days, for as much as I praised Futariwa at number 10, I'd honestly say to skip the first 2 seasons and just jump right into Splash Star. It's the first season done over again, but done over far better. Those who defiled the holy fountains, stop your cruel behavior at once.
ときめく力は任せなさいスプラッシュダウン
Number 3. Smile Precure. And now for the season that brought many new viewers into the Precure fandom. For those of you with a Netflix account, you may recognize this season under its Americanized name, Glitter Force. For how mega popular Precure is in Japan, I find it kind of odd that only 3 of its seasons have ever been translated over to the West, the other 2 being the original Futariwa and Doki Doki. Then again, considering how much the Saban brand dubbing company localized and butchered the heck out of the characters and plot, arguably even worse than the Deke dub of Sailor Moon, maybe it's for the better that Precure remains a Japan-only property. But to be clear, I'm not dissing anyone who liked Glitter Force. If you liked it, great. If Glitter Force is what got you to check out the rest of the Precure franchise, even greater. We're just here to talk about the original version in all its subtitled glory. The Kingdom of Marchinland, where various characters from fairy tales reside, is attacked by the evil King Pierrot, this demonic clown dude who intends to give the universe an unhappy ending, but is stopped when the Queen of Marchinland uses the last of her energy to seal him away. When King Pierrot's minions from the Bad End Kingdom try to revive him by harnessing negative energy from the people of Earth, the Queen sends a fairy named Candy to assemble a team to stop them. Pretty soon we meet the likes of fairy tale loving Miyuki, cure Happy, volleyball champion Akane, cure Sunny, manga artist Yayoi, cure Peace, soccer player and family loving Now, cure March, and student council president Reika, cure Beauty. And together these 5 must collect magical tokens called the Cure Decors that will enable them to upgrade their element-based powers and revive the Queen to save the world. On the surface, this may sound like your most bog-standard Precure plot, and yeah, it kind of is. Alternate magical world that's under threat, trying to revive a king or queen, minions collecting energy for their dark lord, a magic MacGuffin fetch quest, the list goes on. But I think what made Smile so appealing and entertaining to so many is the execution of said tropes. First off, the animation, character designs, and just overall art direction is fantastic. Granted, the entire franchise is a rainbow enthusiast dream come true, but if I had to name only one season as the most colorful one, it would be Smile. There is not a single frame of this season that isn't popping with some sort of bright color. Secondly, I always loved it whenever a Precure team had some sort of base of operations or main hangout spot. It always made the group feel that much more like a traditional superhero team. Doki Doki and Kira Kira came close with Alice's tricked out mansion and the TARDIS-inspired kitchen cafe, but for my money, the Smile group has, hands down, the best secret base of any Precure team. It's the only one that I can legitimately call a secret superhero lair, considering only our protagonists have access to it, and you need a special passcode to get inside it. Since our theme this time is fairy tales, the Smile's base of operations is an interdimensional library that you can access via any bookshelf anywhere. And from this secret base, with just a bit of concentration, you can then warp yourself to any place in the world. And thankfully, this is a device that isn't brushed to the side and forgotten, as we get multiple episodes where the girls go on a couple globe-trotting adventures. International flights and passports? Who needs that? And on the subject of introducing a device and not forgetting about it, the magic MacGuffins of this season that the Cures are hunting for actually put to good use. That may sound like a no-brainer to do from a writing standpoint, but honestly, in most other Precure seasons, whenever a MacGuffin fetch quest is involved, it almost never really goes beyond anything besides new colorful trinket to sell to kids. Heck, some of the time, you don't even get a real sense of how far along our heroes are in their quest until some plot-relevant episode. But not Smile. Whenever they get another decor for their collection, typically by the next episode they utilize it in some fashion, and we see a clear marker of where our heroes and villains are in their respective quests, whether it's counting the spaces left in the jewelry box or the clock counting down when King Pierrot is ready to awaken again. Speaking of the villains, we're also given 4 of arguably the most memorable antagonists in the franchise. Granted, they may not be the best ones, there's other seasons with villains that have far more depth to them, but on personality and design alone, when I think back on the franchise, they're one of the first ones I think of. Tying in with the fairy tale theme, we got a dopey ogre, a wicked witch whose spells and inventions cause all sorts of havoc, both for the heroes and her own teammates, and the big bad wolf, who isn't really all that tough once you start to break him down, and a jester who would give him from the Powerpuff Girls a run for his money on the level of creepiness. We also don't get the typical pattern of dealing with one general, they're defeated, and then introduce the next one. No, we're introduced to all these guys fairly early on, and we stick with them through the entire season. Sometimes they team up, sometimes they're just hanging out and doing dumb stuff together like normal people. Much like the villains from Splash Star, I was never bored whenever their scenes came up, and their motivations for doing what they do comes from a strangely sympathetic place that's revealed in one of the last episodes, of which I won't spoil. And on that note, what this supposed back-to-basic seasons of Precure does best is its characters. While the theme of fairy tales and making sure that stories don't get a bad ending is fairly obvious, there's also a secondary message going on, one that's a bit more subtle in its execution. And that lesson is, what happens when you fail and how do you deal with it? I won't spoil any specific plot points here, as the impact of these situations is really more effective when you go in as blind as possible, but in short, each of our heroines has a special interest or hobby or life goal that they want to achieve, or some character flaw to overcome. From Miyuki dealing with inner self-doubt, to Akane finding love, to Yayoi trying to break into the manga industry, to now taking care of her family and the sports team that relies on her, to Reika trying to figure out what she wants to do in life without just blindly following whatever path her peers set out for her. And at some point, both in their normal lives and on the battlefield as cures, each and every one of the girls fails. And I mean fail hard. And when these moments happen, the show says, yes kids, at some point or another, you're gonna screw up. Sometimes you may even do something irreversibly bad. But what matters is, how do you deal with that failure? How do you move on from it? And most importantly, how do you learn from it? Even Candy, the cute fairy companion who in most other seasons is used mainly for dumping plot exposition, sees some character development, going from acting like a toddler to becoming a responsible team member who's ready to sacrifice herself to save the world. Part of this probably stems from the fact that in March of 2011, Japan experienced a massive and devastating earthquake, which was shortly followed by a tsunami which killed close to 16,000 people. The season that preceded this one, Sweet Precure, suffered a lot in its writing quality and drastic change in tone because of this. And from various sources, it's been pretty much confirmed that Smile was conceived to be lighter in tone in response to this disaster. The season's continuous message of never give up and keep on smiling is a reflection of that. For as silly and goofy as some of this season's episodes can get, it makes the serious moments that much more impactful. It's a season that says, you will suffer failure, you will suffer hardship, but you can't let that failure define you. You can't let that hardship trick you into thinking there will never be a light at the end of the tunnel. Things can and will get better, but only if you summon the willpower to make that brighter future happen. No matter what, you need to get back up and try again. With messages of overcoming adversity set against a backdrop of bright, cheerful colors, this is one of the best seasons to get newcomers into the franchise. Our 5 lights will guide us to the future. Smile, smile. Number 2. Go Princess Precure. Ah, yes, the other season a rival hardcatch in terms of its overall writing and popularity, and for good reason. It's the season that's arguably the most flawless both in its character development, its themes, and execution. A young girl named Haruka dreams of becoming a princess like the ones in fairy tales. However, she's always being bullied by her classmates due to her unconventional dream. Soon after, she meets a boy named Kanata who gives her a strange charm while having her promise to never give up on her dreams. Cut to 8 years later, and a now 13-year-old Haruka begins attending the Noble Academy boarding school while still cherishing her dreams of becoming a princess like the one from her picture books. But one fateful day, she encounters two fairy creatures from a magic dimension called the Hope Kingdom, Pafu and Aroma, who are being pursued by members of an evil empire called Disdark. Their leader, a witch named Despair, wants to bring despair to the world by locking dreams away, and has already brought destruction to Hope Kingdom. And as it turns out, that charm that Kanata gave to Haruka is actually a special key that allows her to transform into one of Hope Kingdom's chosen warriors, Cure Flora. Now along with her friends, including budding oceanographer Minami, Cure Mermaid, junior fashion model Kirara, Cure Twinkle, and an actual royal blood princess Toa, Cure Scarlet, this foursome must find a way to defeat Despair and unlock the dream doors that will restore Hope Kingdom, all while discovering what it truly means to be a princess. Where do I even start? There is so much that I want to say about this season, but I really can't because of major spoilers, so go in as blind as you can, and just trust me when I say that from the heroes, to the villains, to the fairies, to the animation, to the side characters, everything about this season is about as close to perfection as you can get in terms of Precure. Starting off with the art, this season greatly utilized the help of CGI to give us more creative camera angles and fluid movement. For my money, this is easily some of the best fight animation in the entire franchise in terms of episode-to-episode quality. Hugito is a close second, and there are some truly memorable fights in that season too, but even then, they had the occasional stiff episode where you could tell where the budgets got cut. Not Go Princess. Save for maybe one or two instances, there really isn't a specific time where I was bored watching a battle. The quality of that first fight that Cure Flora gets into in episode 1 is pretty much maintained throughout the rest of the show. You'd think with the girls wearing princess dresses that they'd have a heck of a time moving around, but somehow they make it work. Our antagonists this time around also have some of the most creative designs of any Precure villain team. Combine this with the season's lock and key motif, and I heavily suspect that someone on this production team was a fan of Kingdom Hearts. And again, being careful in the spoilers, each one of these guys meets their end in ways I didn't see coming. Some are reformed, some die, some supposedly die but then come back. Some of them started off as good people but were corrupted. Let's put it this way, these baddies are always going to keep you guessing as to what's going to happen next. Finally, on to our heroes. Each one of the protagonists is a joy to get to know, and it was tricky to choose a favorite among them. They all lead interesting lives, and each one of their character-focused episodes was never boring. I was never like, oh, it's a this person episode, great. I was always excited to see every person develop. Even our two fairies this time around get an arc that we periodically check in on, in particular Aroma striving to be the best butler he can be. Frankly, he should have probably just taken tips from Doki Doki Sebastian, would have saved him a lot of work. And our heroines are treated fairly realistically. Minami changes her life goals partway through and is left fearing if her parents will be okay with her not taking on the family business. And in Kirara's case, she pretty much got her life all figured out, leading to her duties as a cure getting in the way of her many career-furthering appointments. Heck, she actually outright refuses the call at first, something that's sort of been periodically done in past seasons, but the execution was never quite like this. Most of the time, you'll have the one girl who's afraid to become a cure, mostly because they're afraid of basically becoming a soldier in a war, which is understandable, but of course they inevitably gather their courage and change their mind, etc. Not here, though. Kirara isn't afraid of the responsibility or battle or anything. She's just like, sorry guys, I'm too busy being a fashion model. I don't have time for this. You gotta find someone else. Bye. Like, at first I laughed because her reaction to all this magic stuff seemed so calm and blasé about the whole thing, but then I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense. How would you feel if your normal happy life and successful career got interrupted by someone telling you to drop everything to risk your life to save the world? That's a legit reason to say no and a real human response. And much like Spider-Man, she has to find a way to balance her career and her world-saving double life. Also realistic is the treatment of the side characters, most notably Yui, Haruka's roommate at the school who discovers that she's a Precure. I love that there's a side character who gets let in on the secret, and knowing this franchise, I was totally expecting her to become a 6th Ranger Cure, but it doesn't happen. It's nice to have a team of Cures with a normal friend who knows their secret and is able to help give alibis for them as well as keep them grounded to the real world and remind them of what's going on in the normal world. It's not often that Precure does this sort of thing, and I wish they did it more. But if I had to pick a favorite character, it would definitely be our main heroine, Haruka. She's someone who's constantly striving to improve herself, trying all sorts of new things, and isn't instantly good. Episodes will go by showing her practicing and slowly getting better with occasional hiccups along the way. From sewing, to playing violin, to ballet, to proper dinner etiquette, to baking, this girl is game for anything, and once she puts her mind to something, she never gives up. And in her quest to become the best version of herself that she can be, she'll slowly uncover the true meaning of being a princess. Is being a princess just something you have to be born into? Or is being a princess more like a way of life? The way you carry yourself, the way you treat others, your attitude, your beliefs, your dedication to bettering yourself and the lives of others. If we could all do that, then maybe we can find the princess within ourselves. With such a great balance of plot, character development, and consistently good animation, this was probably the quickest I ever got through a Precure season, as I just couldn't stop watching, and for any newcomers, it's the season I would recommend the most. O dream entrapped within a frozen cage, we shall reclaim you. Prepare yourself. Before we get to number 1, I want to very quickly name off some of my favorite aspects of the franchise overall, so here comes a top 10 lightning round. First up, my top 10 favorite cures. Doesn't matter whether the season overall was crappy or not, we're just focusing on the characters themselves. Number 10, Cure White from Futariwa. She's such a sweetheart and I love her passion for science. Number 9, Cure Yell from Hagato. She's always a super supportive friend and matures into such a great leader and parent. Number 8, Cure Rosetta from Doki Doki. I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. She's a millionaire with amazing butler, knows martial arts, and can fly a freaking jet plane, and not once does she ever come off as spoiled. She's the Batman Precure. Nuff said. Number 7, Cure Moonlight from Heartcatch, arguably one with the most interesting backstory out of all her teammates. Her story is really tragic and heart-wrenching, which makes it all the more satisfying when she works through her grief and finds the will to fight again. Number 6, Cure Milky from Star Twinkle. She was the one saving grace of an otherwise disappointing season. Honestly, she should have been the pink lead instead. She's super cute, and I really enjoyed her character development as she expanded her knowledge of the universe. Number 5, Cure Passion from Fresh, another one who had really good development. Out of all the times that the franchise ever did the bad guy reforms and becomes a cure trope, Passion is the best example of it, and I've yet to find anyone who's topped it. Number 4, Cure Mint from Yes 5. She's a writer who wants to be a novelist. I really related to her as I've gone through virtually the same thing in my own writing, and I enjoyed seeing her always working on her book and having to rewrite stuff over and over, improving each time. Number 3, Cure Egret from Splash Star. She's a really talented artist and I wish I had even a third of her skills. She's another one I really related to as I'm always striving to improve my art. Also, she lives in an observatory. I want to live in her house. Number 2, Cure Peace from Smile, aka the Cure that I would turn out to be if I took one of those personality quizzes. She is exactly like me. She's an artist trying to break into the comics industry, and I love the contrast of her Fluttershy personality, but once you get her on the subject of her special interest, she won't stop talking. She loves manga and giant mecha and comic books and all kinds of geeky things. 10 out of 10, would adopt as my sister. And number 1, Cure Flora from Go Princess. For as much as I connected with Mint, Egret, and Peace in regards to special interest, Flora is basically a nice balance of everything. I loved her open and friendly personality. I admired how she was always open to trying new things. I admired her can-do attitude and how she never gave up on her dream. I liked how even though people picked on her, she never let that change who she was. I loved her character arc as she redefined what a princess really is. Just everything about this girl is a win. One of the best protagonists the franchise has had, hands down. Next up, my top 10 favorite fairy companions. Again, not really taking into account the quality of the season, just looking at these characters individually. Number 10, Nuts from Yes 5. Perfect example of the jerk with a heart of gold. He comes off as snobby and rude, but you see he does care about his friends, and I liked his relationship with Cure Mint and how he was always trying to help her improve on her writing. Number 9, Candy from Smile. Kinda went over this already, but to reiterate, I loved her character development and how she becomes a full-fledged, mature team member by the end. Number 8, Mofrune from Mahoskai, one of the more unique fairies since she started off as an inanimate object but became real. She's just all around cute, definitely one of the better fairy designs. Number 7, Tart from Fresh. Arguably the first time we got a fairy without an ear-grating squeaky voice. Became kind of a butt monkey and could be a bit grumpy, but it was done in the best way possible. Rather than being annoying, his frustration at times was understandable and hilarious. He's basically the at the end of his rope mentor trope, but done correctly. Number 6, Davi from Doki Doki. Out of all the fairies we got that season, Davi was probably the most developed. She was the first one of the group to gain a human form, and she was a really great mentor for the Cures. Number 5, Coco from Yes 5. The first time we ever saw the fairies getting human disguises. I love his cute little fox design, and I liked how they went all out on him becoming the mentor for the group, both during the fights and at school when he disguised himself as their teacher. Probably one of the better ways they got a fairy to interact with the group and society in general. Number 4, Prunce from Star Twinkle. If Cure Milky was the main thing that kept me watching that season, Prunce was the other reason. We got alien cures, so we also got alien fairies. His octopus design is not only adorable, but he was probably one of the most physically useful fairies as he could use his shape-shifting powers to help out the Cures in all kinds of ways. Number 3, Harry from Hugato. He's a cute hamster, check. He has a hot human form, check. He has to become a parent for Hugaton and is really good at it, check. He's a good mentor for the girls, check. And he has a tragic and interesting connection to the villains and is trying to atone for his past. Check, check, and check. Number 2, Aroma from Go Princess. Starting with Smile, it seems like this trend came about of trying to give the fairies more agency in the plot and give them more character development and not just be the cute mascot. And for me, Aroma is one of the best examples of it. He has a dream of being a great butler to a great princess, and the little journey he goes on to better himself is fun and satisfying to watch. Number 1, Pafu from Go Princess. Yeah, she and Aroma go hand in hand here pretty much. Basically, copy-paste everything I said about Aroma here, but the reason she beat him out is her super-duper adorable design. Seriously, the cuteness level peaked with her. She has, hands down, the best fairy design in the franchise, and none have been able to top her since. Next up, my top 10 favorite Cure uniforms. Number 10, Doki Doki, specifically Cure Ace. I thought they pulled off the playing card motif well, and to me, Ace looked the best out of all of them. Number 9, the Hugato team, specifically Cure Etoile. This group really had a pastel vibe going on, and Etoile stood out the most. Anything with an emphasis on stars is going to get an A+ from me. Number 8, the Star Twinkle team, specifically Cure Milky. The season was kinda meh, but their costumes weren't. The outer space theme was on point here, and to me, Milky was the prettiest. I think it's her antenna that does it for me. Yep, definitely the antenna. Number 7, the Fresh group, specifically Cure Berry, also had shades of a playing card motif going on with this group, despite them being named after different fruits. Berry's my favorite out of the 4. Maybe it's the barrier midriff thing going on, maybe it's the ponytail, I don't know. I just know I like it. Number 6, the Futariwa duo, specifically Cure Black. It's frilly and cute while also being functional. The girls get practical boots to run and fight in. They're simple but iconic. Number 5, the Heartcatch team, specifically Cure Blossom. The flower motif was woven into and expressed perfectly in these outfits, especially Blossom. And much like Berry, I think it's the hair that does it for me. Number 4, the Smile team, specifically Cure Sunny. The costumes are practical and easy to fight in, as well as super bright and colorful, and they have probably the most unique hairstyles of any other team. I'm kind of drawn to Sunny the most for some reason, probably because she's the only orange Cure in canon. Number 3, Yes 5 Go-Go, specifically Cure Aqua. Much as I liked Yes 5, their first outfits were just kinda bleh. Go-Go was the big upgrade they needed. I love the vests, and you can see their individual colors much easier than in the first version. As for why Aqua gets singled out, I guess I just think the outfit looks best in blue. Number 2, Maho Sky, specifically Cure Miracle. The balance of pink and white, her long red hair, the little witch hat, just the overall design of the dress. I honestly don't know how to describe why I like this costume so much, I just do. They actually went through a bunch of costume changes depending on what spell they were using, and every time they'd use a different transformation, I'd be like, no, please, use your original one, it's the best looking one. And number 1, the Go Princess team, specifically Cure Flora. Maybe it has something to do with her also being my favorite Cure, but her dress is just super pretty. I love how her hair starts off blonde but has pink highlights on the ends. I like how all the girls are able to easily fight despite wearing full-on dresses. Like, Disney wishes they could design something like this. I could stare at these costumes all day. Next up, my top 10 favorite individual attacks. Doesn't matter whether I like the character or not, we're just looking at the attacks in a vacuum.
Precure! Sapphire Precure! Sunny Fire! Fudoke! 愛のメロディー キュアスティック ビーチロット 悪いの悪いの飛んでいけ プリキュア ラブサンシャイン フレッシュ 彩れラブキッスルときめきなさいエースショットドキューンプリキュアミルキーショックキラキラキラルンジェラートシャイク
victory!
Next, my top 10 favorite transformations. Again, doesn't matter what I think of the character, we're just looking at the quality of the sequences.
びる一輪の花、キュアサンシャイン。チャレンジプリキュアビートアーテン。真っ赤なハートは幸せの証。触れたてフレッシュキュアパッション。
キュアラモードデコレーションチョコレート、強さと愛をレッツラまでまで。キュアショコラ出来上がり。
プリキュアプリンセスエンゲージ。シンクの炎のプリンセスキュアスカーレット。愛の切り札キュアエース。美しさは正義の証。ウインク一つであなたのハートを射抜いて差し上げますわ。スターカラーペンダントカラーチャージ。きらめく星の力で憧れの私描くよ。 招くミルキーウェイキュアミルキー
And finally, my top 10 favorite theme songs. We're not taking into account how much I liked a certain season or not. We're focused strictly on the opening theme.
Sweet, sweet, pretty good.
And finally, my number one favorite season of the entire Pretty Cure franchise is... Fresh Pretty Cure. Okay, let me be brutally honest here. This and Go Princess are interchangeable when it comes to favoritism. But if we really had to split hairs, if there was only one season I had to watch over again, I'd actually much rather sit through Go Princess a second time. If we're really being honest here, Go Princess is the true number one. But there's a reason, several reasons actually, why Fresh ultimately took home the gold. But first, the story. A magical world called the Sweets Kingdom is under siege by Labyrinth, an evil organization who wants to take over the universe by way of brainwashing everyone into joining their world of organized conformity. But to do so, they need Infinity, which is basically a supercomputer that could help them branch out and connect to every known world and dimension imaginable. With time running out, a fairy named Tart, along with the baby fairy Chiffon, escape to Earth in search of the legendary Pretty Cure. Pretty soon they run into Love, and yes, that's really her name, a teenage girl who loves to dance and dreams of being a pop star one day. She, along with her two best friends, fashion model Mickey and veterinarian in training Inori, soon become Cure Peach, Cure Berry, and Cure Pine. And they, along with eventual member Setsuna, Cure Passion, team up to protect the multiverse from being overtaken by these close-minded stealers of individuality. Now, judging by that summary, I'm sure the plot kind of sounds like it's a bit all over the place in terms of its themes, and in the beginning, yes, you'd kind of be right there. The first 10 episodes or so are, well, they're not bad so much as they're just a bit bumpy as they try to get everything established. After the infamous episode with the wig monster is when things finally kick into high gear. And yeah, at first glance, the plot synopsis sounds a bit of a scattered mess. Magic Kingdom under attack from a supercomputer, and our main heroines love dancing, but their outfits have a playing card motif, but their cure names are all based around fruits, and what the heck is going on here? But trust me, give it a chance and they do find clever ways of tying everything together. If I had to pinpoint one major lesson/theme to take away from this season, it would be the idea of individuality versus conformity. Our main villain this time around is Mabius, and in my opinion is the most memorable big bad of the entire franchise. For one thing, he's the only one I actually remembered the name of, considering how much the characters talk about him in every episode. And for another, his main objective of taking over the universe by way of subjugating the populace really reminded me of the Borg from Star Trek. Until Hugato and Star Twinkle, this was one of the seasons that leaned the most into science fiction. As for why he's doing this, well, I don't want to give away one of the biggest plot twists of the season, but let's just say he has one of the most interesting and unique backstories of any Pretty Cure villain, one that I didn't see coming at all, one that hammers home the notion of not blindly following the crowd and trying to make the world a better place with the unique talents you've been given. Even the henchmen are all fun to watch and get development as time goes by, with each of them being fairly normal people who actually care for one another when one of their teammates dies and or is given the pink slip by Mabius. You so very rarely see this kind of humanization of the villains in Pretty Cure. And this leads into the main reason why Fresh came out ahead of everyone else on this list, and that is for its sheer importance and the impact it had on the franchise. Now, to be clear, this is technically just a rumor, though it's a popular theory that's been passed around a lot, and considering the amount of evidence I'm about to give, it's a theory that I'm also on board with. But anyway, after the plunging ratings of Yes 5 Go-Go, apparently the franchise as a whole was in a bit of a slump. I'm guessing that many of the fans fans were getting older and kind of growing out of it, but whatever the case, Precure's popularity was on the decline to the point that when Fresh came out, this could have been the final season of the franchise. Many fans have dubbed this the do-or-die season of Precure, and had it failed, then this video probably wouldn't exist. Now, obviously, in hindsight, we all know that the franchise didn't end and carried on for years and years to come, but why? What was the magic formula that made Fresh such a success? Well, to answer that, you need some context. Up to this point, we had the original Futariwa, Max Heart, Splash Star, and both Yes 5s, and by this time a certain formula was established for how a Precure season typically goes. But when Fresh came along, it was aptly named for being a fresh new look for Precure. My guess is that the showrunners were like, so this is probably going to be the final season? Well then screw it, let's just go all out. Let's take everything we normally do and completely mess with it. We're gonna be as different as possible. And it wound up being a gamble that paid off. Every show up to this point had the team members all having to meet one another for the first time. But here, our three main heroines know each other right out of the gate, having been best friends since preschool. Even their families are all friends with one another. There was a much bigger emphasis on the families and the girls' home lives this season, I'd argue even more than Splash Star or Yes 5. And speaking of Splash Star, while this season wasn't the first instance of a bad guy turning over to the side of good, it was the first time that a villain not only reformed but became a full-fledged Precure. Pure Passion really took the fandom by storm back when she first appeared, and in my humble opinion, she's the best 6th Ranger of the franchise. Many future seasons have tried this idea again, but to me, none of them have quite been able to top Passion's amazing character arc and the guilt she feels for the terrible things she did in the past and the steps she takes to making up for those mistakes. To add to the list of firsts, we get the origin of the CGI end credits dance sequences that all future seasons adopted. It's the first time the heroines gain special abilities outside of being cures, with their magic items granting them the power to talk to animals, teleportation, all sorts of stuff. It's also the first time we get memorable and multiple side characters who discover the girls' superhero identities and do what they can to help the girls out with their crime fighting. Gold medal goes to Kairu, the wacky donut salesman who's also a secret agent. Seriously, he's one of the best side characters in the entire franchise. And speaking of reveals, this also marks the first time the Cures reveal their identities to their parents. Some people thought this decision kind of came out of nowhere, but I think just the opposite. The girls are about to fight the big bad for the final time and aren't sure if they're going to die or not, so they want to tell their families the truth. They don't have some huge discussion about it, and it's not really needed. They all just give one another a look, and you can tell by their expressions what they're all thinking. And that leads me to my final point. This was the first season where it really felt like actions had serious consequences. Unlike past seasons where the girls were careful to keep the Precure thing mostly a secret, for the first time the Cures become public figures that everyone's aware of. And also unlike past seasons where the damages sustained in battle would magically disappear afterward, Fresh was bold enough to wreck the city and have the city remain wrecked. We finally got actual consequences to the Monster of the Week fights with battle damage that doesn't magically go away. A fight will happen, and an episode or two later you'll see construction crews in the background cleaning up the aftermath. From what I can remember, no other Precure series did this, and I wish it was done more often. And it's not just the buildings, the Cures themselves get beat up pretty good to the point that they become so exhausted they're actually hospitalized for an episode or two. Everyone says Hardcatch was the most mature / darkest season of the franchise, and there is a good argument for that, but I'd argue it was Fresh that was the most serious, or at least comes equally close. Fresh was the season that pulled out all the stops, dared to take multiple risks, and set so many trends that would carry on through the rest of the franchise. For as mega popular as Hardcatch, Smile, and Go Princess was, they most likely wouldn't even exist, or at least would have turned out very differently without Fresh. If Futariwa is what started the franchise, then Fresh is the one that saved it, proving that it sometimes pays to take risks. And it's for all these reasons that Fresh is my #1 pick for my favorite season of Precure. Phew, well that certainly was a mouthful. Thank you all for sticking with me through this recap of a year-long adventure I went on, a journey that I hope all of you will take someday. For as much as I like Sailor Moon and can recognize and appreciate its impact on the magical girl genre, it's not the be-all end-all of magical girl shows, and I hope this video has helped you guys to discover an anime franchise that really needs more attention in the West. Pick out whichever one of these seasons looks the most appealing to you and dive right in. You won't be disappointed. I'm Cartoon12 and I hope you enjoyed the countdown. I'll have more top 10 lists for you soon, and if you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.